we're out here at Promontory Park talking about some of the CSD issues still, some of the concerns that the residents have. And I'm here with Dean Getz. Dean Getz is, how do you bill yourself, a concerned taxpayer? Uh, but yes, he and I are both deep researchers into some of these issues facing CSD, and we just want to do some clarification. So, Dean, we're out here at Promontory Park, and there's a real anomaly here on how this park is being assessed for its LLAD maintenance payments. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing, Gary, that as I understand it, 900 homes have historically funded what is the best and brightest park in the greater El Dorado Hills community. And when you juxtapose that against Serrano, for example, who has two of its three parks installed, and all three of those are slated to be general fund funded parks, two of which have always been.
Yeah.
It just really speaks to the inconsistencies that have hampered the CSD's ability to go forward.
So it's always been the opinion of the Promontory residents here that this park is used by, a large community coming from Folsom up to play soccer leagues from all over the Western Slope because of the amenities here. But the maintenance assessments are confined to this relatively small 900 group of homes, and that's what their issue is and why they're trying to repeal this assessment. Now, we've learned, or we understand, that CSD is obviously concerned about having those assessments repealed because then they don't have the funds to maintain their parks, and that would apply now to Heritage and to the Blackstone parks if they had to recover from those loss of funds. So, what are their options, and where's kind of the root cause? Because I think they're admitting that the engineering reports on who's really using the parks and where the special benefits and the assessments should come from hasn't been right. What are their options? What would their an appropriate position should be in light of these kind of incorrect assessments and adjustments that need to be made to the engineering report?
Well, I've been stressing consistency. So if you have a special benefit for a park that's being assessed to those in close proximity to the park, that would be the way it works in all of these master plan communities. But yet that's not what's been happening. The Serrano LLAD, for example, hasn't been operated to this day and has been suggested that it's just a backup funding mechanism versus when I lived in Serrano, we certainly came to this park because there wasn't a water amenity. Yeah. We've had birthdays at my two boys have had birthdays at this park, and you can see where organized sports are available in Promontory, again funded by 900 roughly homes or less, and in Serrano with 5,000 homes, those folks and those homes have to come here to really participate in organized sports, which therein lies the discrepancies that have arisen to measures like QRNS.
Yeah. So just to recap, as you pointed out, Serrano doesn't pay an LLAD assessment, right? But yet they're using this park that's all being
that is absolutely clear and correct. And the idea that Serrano doesn't have an operating LLAD for its amenities was something that got lost in the understanding in the mid-90s and hasn't been corrected. The LLAD was formed in 1995 when the master plan community was just being started. There wasn't a park even installed then. The first park, Village Green, was created in 1999. And if you think about what the second park even looks like, most people don't even see it as a park. Alan Lindsay.
Yeah.
There is no CSD sign, there is no parking lot, and there isn't really a complete fleshed out park with bathroom amenities and things that you would think of as a district park.
It looks like it's an extension of Oak Meadow Elementary School.
Absolutely.
You wouldn't know any other.
Yet the largest master plan community in the greater El Dorado, in all of El Dorado County, doesn't really see the amenities that it's missing or doesn't recognize that it is missing amenities, with the largest park, 12.5 acres, still yet to be developed.
Yeah.
Which goes to a lot of the concerns that are now creeping up in how other operations and other subdivisions are working because it's being used as a benchmark. If
Yep.
Serrano doesn't operate where they pay, why do we pay a special benefit? And it's really highlighted here in the promontory.
Yeah, the inconsistency is unconscionable, really. Okay, very good. And so the amenities, I mean, Bass Lake was certainly supposed to be part of the equation for Serrano, right? And the fact that we're missing Bass Lake Park
Well, and
hasn't
just to
been
be
developed.
really clear, the technicality is that there were 3 park sites in the El Dorado Hills specific plan. They were S1, connoting School 1, School 2, and S3 being at Bass Lake. There was a passage in the agreement that the park had to be put in by the time the school went in, and there was never a school put up at Bass Lake.
Yeah.
And so there was always a rub about the timing and initiation of the Village J Park. But that is confined to the 12.5 acres in the El Dorado Hills specific plan. And then, again, there was some jostling of acreage, but it isn't the larger parcels that have been since purchased by the CSD.
Yeah. So another issue with these measures Q, R, and S, CSD is not honoring them because they say that an LLAD is not applicable to a Prop 218 assessment contest, right? That it has to be spread over the entire CSD, which is going to be affected by the loss of these assessments. You have a comment on this? And I know you've.
I do. I think that's a stretch. If you take the basic premise that who has the right to raise an LLAD's fees, it's the affected individuals in the promontory, for example.
Yeah.
It isn't the greater community that decides they're going to pay more. And the same thing would apply in reverse. If you reduced the rates that are paid in the promontory, you would think that that would be just the affected voters. The understanding that you can go down $1 by the affected voters in the promontory, but you can't go to 0, is a misapplication, in my opinion, of the law, and it really negates the ability that was allowed for by the voters at Prop 218. It effectively nullifies the law.
Yes.
The CSD might be taking the approach because they have been pretty beat up about giving away things like the turnkey park that's owed to them at Village J in Serrano. They might be taking a more balanced approach, hearing that voters are concerned about if a park like this is no longer funded the way it's been funded, it's going to be absorbed by the general fund, which is the rest of the voters. That's understandable. But the approach that they aren't good customer service agents or good stewards of the public's funds, and that they're going to continue to charge what they've historically charged here to just 900 homes, again highlights the inconsistencies that are hampering the CSD's ability to move forward.
Yeah, and it's basically the same thing at Heritage too, right? That they're not using that park.
Well, and what's interesting about the Heritage Park is that it's in a senior community where they've splintered off some of Heritage to pay toward the CFD 2019, which has always been referred to as the Saratoga development. And there is a public park there that some portion of Heritage is paying toward.
Yeah.
And the development of the park itself violates the actual original specific plan with lighting and other amenities that weren't allowed for in a senior community.
Yep.
I think that when the CSD got caught with those amenities, not the current board, but prior boards really thumbed their nose at the community and said, we're going to do it anyway.
Yeah.
And that, again, those inconsistencies, not following the rules, is holding back the CSD to this day.
Yeah. All right, well, let's talk a little bit about an impending decision, apparently, that CSD has to exercise their option for the second half of the golf course. I think you caught in one of my last videos about Kevin Lowen talking about that property, that second half of the golf course, could no longer be rezoned, right? So the concern when the golf course was first repurchased was the Parker was going to turn it into homes. If that's no longer an option and it really truly can't be rezoned, why would it have such a high valuation? We've seen valuations under the current zoning as low as $1.5 million only a few years ago. And yet the option for just the second half is $10 million. If it can't be rezoned into, a large housing development, why would we exercise the option at that price? Especially if we don't have a plan to build something on it, whether it's the golf course or a hotel or something. If that hasn't been determined, $10 million seems like a lot at this point for something that's of questionable use and apparently can't be rezoned into any kind of high density housing. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I mean, those are all interesting points, and I think that one of the reasons that the electeds can hang their hat on paying $10 million for the first piece is because they did tie up the second piece,
Yeah.
and not tie it up just for the right to buy it for 18 months, but more importantly, there was an exhibit and a covenant in that first agreement that said that if the public through the CSD purchased half the golf course, the other half would remain recreational use high, as it has always been,
Mm-hmm.
and would be developed in concert or in connection with however the piece that the public purchased was being developed as a good community partner. Those passages are valuable.
Yeah.
And to be able to purchase, say, the second piece for $10 million is a nice option, but not necessary, especially if you look at it in the backdrop of now it can't be rezoned because of the covenant, because of the first purchase.
Yeah.
Its highest and best use is likely what it is zoned for today, which is that recreational high, and maybe doesn't even need to be purchased at all. Maybe the owner of that property can be approached to do something that's been presented as a public-private partnership because they retain ownership on that half of the property.
Yeah, that seems to make more sense.
I think discussing this and putting out these kinds of videos and highlighting what's available educates the electeds
Yes.
and or the professionals that are working for the electeds, and shows that the community has an interest and there are all these options. And
Yeah.
the option here related to the golf course isn't just buy it at any price.
Yeah. And that's always been one of the biggest problems that I've had. Maybe you pay attention to this more than I do, but have you heard any of the internal thinking or any surveys of the public that have come out relative to this golf course purchase? Have they been transparent about what their options are or what they think the current valuation is or any of the current plans that they have to develop it out? Or is they're just going to make a decision without the public really being aware of these options and potential plans?
I'm sure you would agree, if I were on the board or you were on the board, I would want to do things differently. I would err on the side of trying to be transparent. I generally perceive that folks get elected, and as soon as they get elected, they're on a different team because they're told you're now part of the apparatus.
Or they've got their own agenda, or they, and then they feel like, hey, I'm put in here
to make the decisions for us, right?
I get to choose.
Right. That all being said, no, I haven't heard anything. But the fact that I haven't heard anything, and as much as I push on through public records and other requests, there's a concern that they would fall into just buying it thinking that the $10 million was the only option, and it really isn't. There's other options here that need to be explored.
Yeah. The reason why this is, I think, a hot button is, when we're talking to people as we're collecting recall signatures, and not many people are in favor of spending $10 million on that property once they understand kind of what's at stake and that there might be other options. $10 million is a lot to anybody.
Well, and then you look at what the CSD has for total park amenities strewn about the various subdivisions and in their district, $20 million, because it would be two purchases of 10, really is a large ticket item with no funding mechanism behind it to operate whatever would go on it, and with no distinct plan, just an opportunity to do so. And so I think that's, I can understand why folks have organized, because there isn't the communication that the CSD historically should have put out there. And there's been a lot of negative publicity with former general managers and taxation schemes that have come out that really put them in an unfavorable light. So they almost need to do twice as much to regain the community's
Absolutely.
trust.
Absolutely. And I know in that Kevin Lowen kind of a purchase announcement video that I gave a clip to, and maybe I'll insert that back in here, but he talked about it would really be up to the public to make that purchase decision on the second half, and that it probably wouldn't come out of the general fund or the existing CSD finances, that there would have to be some sort of private partnership or bond offering or something else. Do you have any visibility or thoughts on that? Because even back then, they were kind of contemplating that they probably wouldn't be able to take on that purchase themselves.
Well, I've been a big critic of the CSD's finances. They're not well organized, easy for the average person to follow,
For
or
sure.
even somebody who's interested that has some general accounting
Even
background.
themselves to follow.
Yeah, and when questioned about it, they don't understand their limitations. They've gotten caught in using, and I say they, the organization as a whole has gotten caught in trying to use restricted money that couldn't be applied here or there. This goes back to the community was sold, like him or not, by Kevin Lowen, who was the only negotiator in the room in this particular old golf course purchase, on the idea that we are getting this valuable covenant consideration for the second piece by purchasing the first.
Absolutely.
And I think it would be wise to capture that, what he was saying at the time, and present it to the public and have the electeds know that once again we're giving away something that we were sold on, that the CSD bought, and not to give that away for any other reason than we really thoroughly thought through this was a better choice.
Yeah. Do you think that they're hampered by not having this strategic master plan, um, document in place, that they're really making some of these decisions or weighing these options in the absence of any kind of long-term plan? Is that hampered them, or?
Well, I will give the CSD some credit that they didn't need to spend $250,000 plus on a master plan.
That's for sure.
So that really segues into the community, a committee, whether it's standing or ad hoc, could take an existing document and keep it current. The document that's in place right now, put out by professionals, is not very well done. It's got parks in it that really don't belong in there, that are privately owned. It doesn't go into the details of what the community really wants. And if the community were involved in developing that plan, maybe that plan would actually be followed.
You're talking about the 2021 existing master plan?
Yeah, it's been updated and a few iterations, but they have a plan that needs to be updated. Yes. It doesn't need to be scrapped. And more importantly, we're not following the plan. You can ask the Austins and their litigation that they're not following the plan because they got caught with far too much money that hadn't been spent as allowed by law.
Yeah.
That all goes back to they're not looking at what the community, and I say again, the general CSD body isn't looking at what the community would want in what order, and now they're bogged down in defending what they have. We're coming back to here we are at the Promontory, where the ask has been for 900 homes to primarily fund the benefit of this park, even though you and I from Serrano would come over here and use amenities because we don't have them. The idea that Serrano's last park doesn't get developed with something equivalent to this, yet it has 5 times the rooftops, is mind-boggling. And I think some people within the CSD that are in control are starting to recognize that these are the types of discrepancies that need to be addressed, but we've not been able to get them resolved as of yet. And whether that's just because of the day-to-day business getting in the way or some other misunderstandings, I'm really hopeful that this level of scrutiny and engagement by the public drives them across the finish line, because I think many people have seen where Dorado Hills can be amazing.
Amazing. I think it gets back to the point of you can't really overcome your issues until you admit you've got a problem. And there's been a real reluctance to to admit that any of these historical issues that maybe even predate the current board members existed. Trying to save face too much rather than going in and getting to the root cause and fixing the problems. And I think that's what I've heard you advocate quite a bit, and clearly we need to do to move forward in a positive sense and make it El Dorado Hills all it can be.
Absolutely. And I think when you take an assessment of what the parks we do have offer, you can see that we don't have enough fields, we don't have enough aquatic
Pools, yeah.
pools, space to service the
No.
community that we have. And the only way you're going to get that resolved is to go through the processes that got you there and shortchange the district.
Yeah.
And fix them.
And fix them. Yep. Okay. Anything else top of mind for you that we haven't touched on? Concerns you've got going forward? I know they've got some issues on the upcoming board meetings and issues to address this summer.
I just hope that the CSD's leadership will grab these problems by the horns and start tackling them. I know that the CSD has had a lot of negativity and animosity toward them, but they need to have more meetings, more issues need to be addressed, taken one by one and resolved.
More engagement.
And what's happening, or what appears to be happening right now, is the wheels are turning, but we're not actually getting the problem solved.
Yeah. All right. Well, Dean, thanks. It's been a real pleasure.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah. And we'll talk soon.